Good morning and welcome to Gospel Bytes, where we take a bite at the gospel for the day. Today is Friday, July 21st. Excuse me. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Glory to you, O Lord. On the Sabbath, Jesus went through the grain fields. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. When the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." Jesus said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which it was not lawful for him or his companions to eat, but only for the priests. Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple break the Sabbath and yet are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. But if you had known what this means, 'I desire mercy and not sacrifice,' you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Right. So the apostles were picking grain on the Sabbath, and this you might think is stealing because then they get it from a farm or you know, in a place which did not belong to them. But actually, to the Jewish people in those times, fields would have a certain part which is dedicated for the poor. So there's this. Most of the farms are for the owners, but there is that outer region where people who really have nothing to eat can actually pick up grain, and it's not stealing. It was allowed for them to, especially the poor and the hungry. And this is what the apostles were doing. The only crime that they did was that it was during the Sabbath, and they are not supposed to pick the grain. It's not the eating, but it was the picking, which is considered as work. That was defined as work. So you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath. Jesus saying, well, you might think of it as, well, when someone is hungry, you have to feed him. And the Pharisees would say, well, they could wait for another day to eat or to pick the grains. Now, I think there is something deeper than that. That's simply Jesus defending the apostles as doing something good, or helping themselves when they are hungry. What Jesus is saying is something is greater than the Sabbath. And he gave the example of David, and when King Saul was hunting David, David went to the temple, and the priests hid him from the king, and they fed him the bread of the presence. This is dedicated only to the priests. Um, so David and his followers ate it, and it was first of all the generosity of the priests, that they were feeding the hungry, but also Jesus gave the example of, he said, the priests work during the Sabbath and yet guiltless. We priests, we tell people that you should be resting on the Sabbath, you should not be doing any work, and yet the priests are the busiest on Sundays, which is the Catholic equivalent of the Sabbath. And why is that? That we are allowed to do all our work, and people are told to rest, and people are itching to work because they have lots of things to do. You see, the role of the priest is to bring God and humanity together, to reconcile them together. That's our role. And the greatest, or the closest we can be to God, is at the Eucharist. So our role is our main role is the sacrament of the Eucharist, because where that is where we can be closest to God. You know? So that is our first and foremost priestly duty, and that's why we even go to mission areas to celebrate the Mass, and charitable works we can do also. But the greatest way by which we can bring people closer to God is through the Mass. And I know there were times when I have to bring communion also on even on Sundays, and even when I'm tired, but it is our act of mercy. This is what Jesus is saying. It's mercy, not sacrifice, that I desire. This is the way by which, um, out of the mercy of God, out of the mercy of the priest also, that even in our weakest time, we need to bring the Eucharist to the people. We make it possible for people to come closest to God in the Eucharist. So seems to be establishing a new priesthood. He's saying, look at these examples. They were busy on the Sabbath, just as my disciples uh, are busy at the Sabbath. Just as the, the Israelites were commanded by God, who is the Lord of the Sabbath, who commanded them to rest. Here he's saying, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. I am God, and I am instructing these priests to work on the Sabbath, for so that humanity and God can be closest. So that is the main duty of the apostles. And yeah, so it's that's Jesus is establishing a new priesthood surrounding him, the Lord of the Sabbath. As Christians, we are called, just like the Israelites, we're called as a royal priesthood, a holy nation. So it's not just a priest, it is also our duty to bring people to the sacrament where they can be closest to God. So our duty the whole week, you can preach, you can talk to them, you can invite them. And on Sunday, you invite them even more so that they can be closest to God. Because we priests, we cannot invite everyone. We cannot invite your children who don't go to Mass. It will be your duty and responsibility as a royal priesthood. You also have that duty to bring humanity and God together. So your, your duty is not just to have a prayer meeting, or not just to have a party to bring yourselves closer to each other, but to bring them to God. And the closest they can be is at the Mass. So this tells us the importance of this sacrament, and also our duty as priests, and the priesthood of the faithful. So we we hope we can work together in bringing the world and saving souls by bringing them closer to the sacrament. I'm Father Jerry Zambrano, and okay, this is Faith for another edition of Gospel Bites. God bless you. We'll see you soon. Let's get ready for Mass.